This woman woke up alone in the middle of the ocean after her fiancé vanished. How she survived 41 days will leave you speechless. You have to see the unbelievable animal that clawed a man out of his own grave. The final story is so insane. Doctors said it was impossible. Stick around to see how he crawled off the mountain. In October of 1983, when 23-year-old Tammy Ashcraft set sail alongside her fiancé Richard Sharp, the ocean stretched out before them like a promise, endless and untamed, yet strangely welcoming. They had agreed to deliver a 44-foot yacht from Tahiti to San Diego, a voyage longer than anything either of them had ever attempted, but they embraced it with the reckless courage of youth and the quiet confidence of seasoned sailors. Their love had always been bound to the water. On land, they were restless, but at sea they felt whole, carried together by the rhythm of waves and wind. It was not just a journey of miles. It was a journey of devotion, a shared heartbeat in the vastness of the Pacific. But the ocean, with its shifting moods and merciless power, is never simply water and sky. It is a trial, a test that no human heart can bargain with, and soon the sea began to show them its darker face. Word came of a storm, a hurricane swelling in chaotic fury, its path uncertain, its appetite enormous. Tammy and Richard studied their charts, listened to the wind, tried to alter course, but the storm was a hunter and they were the hunted. Each shift they made was met by the storm's own shift, as if some malevolent force had fixed its eye upon them. The air grew heavy, and the horizon twisted into something menacing. The calm blue replaced by a bruise-colored sky. And then it struck. The hurricane did not arrive gradually. It fell upon them with the sudden violence of a beast unchained. Waves 50 feet high rose up like living walls, lifting the yacht skyward before hurling it down again. Each crash reverberating through Tammy's bones as though the vessel itself was snapping apart. She would later recall that in those moments she could not fathom how anything made by human hands could withstand such punishment. Every heartbeat was accompanied by the hiss of spray and the thunderous collapse of water. Richard clung to the helm, tethered by his safety line, his arms straining against the fury, coaxing the battered yacht to ride the waves instead of being devoured by them. Tammy watched him, her love silhouetted against a chaos of spray and sky, his figure both fragile and unyielding. Hours passed in this madness until exhaustion drove her below deck at Richard's urging. She descended, numb with fear, when a rogue wave came from nowhere, immense, merciless, an executioner's blow. It struck the yacht head-on, flipping it backward in a grotesque somersault. The cabin became a coffin of chaos, hurling her against hard surfaces. Darkness claimed her. When her eyes opened again, 27 hours had slipped away. She was half sprawled in the flooded cabin, her head pounding, her ears filled with the groan of a dying vessel. Water seeped in relentlessly, the air damp and metallic with salt. The once orderly cabin was a ruin of broken equipment, floating papers, twisted tools. She rose, each step dragging her through knee-deep water, calling for Richard. She burst onto the deck, her voice lost in the wind. No reply, only emptiness. Her eyes lifted to the cockpit, and there she saw the safety line, snapped, dangling uselessly off the stern. Her fiancé, her companion, the man who had fought the storm with every ounce of strength, was gone. Torn into the ocean, claimed without mercy. The weight of that realization pressed down upon her, but grief could not be indulged. Survival demanded obedience. The yacht was maimed beyond recognition. Mast snapped, sails trailing like lifeless limbs, the radio dead, the engine silent. Yet she forced her mind to calculation, to action. She rigged a makeshift sail from the tatters left behind. She pumped water from the cabin, hour after hour, her body moving as if separate from her sorrow. With only a sextant and a wristwatch, she attempted what few could. She charted a course by hand, her eyes fixed on the stars above even as the emptiness within grew unbearable. She discovered the presence of an ocean current that, if she calculated correctly, could carry her toward Hawaii. And so began her 41-day ordeal, drifting across 1,500 miles of sea, living on canned goods and jars of peanut butter, her skin blistered by sun, her mind haunted by Richard's absence. Every morning she woke with dread that she might have erred, that she would pass Hawaii unseen and drift into an endless grave of water. Each night she clutched the memory of Richard as the only warmth the sea could not steal. At last, land rose on the horizon, blurred by tears and disbelief. When her feet finally touched the soil of Hawaii, her survival became real. Relief came hand in hand with grief, a flood of sorrow for the man who had not returned. For 6 long years, she battled the effects of the head injury from that capsizing, even relearning how to read, until she reclaimed her voice through the memoir Red Sky in Mourning. Her words carried the story of love, loss, and survival, later immortalized on film as Adrift. Thousands of miles away, in 2006, 35-year-old Ricky McGee drove across the scorched loneliness of Australia's Bunton Highway, a ribbon of road stretching across the desert like a line into nothingness. He was a drifter of sorts, a man who had tried his hand at many lives: prawn fisherman, nightclub doorman, carpet salesman, yet always searching for the next chapter. That day, the desert seemed silent, a place where the air itself shimmered with heat and isolation. Then he saw them, 3 men standing beside a stranded car. Compassion, or perhaps simple decency, compelled him to stop. They asked for a ride. He agreed. He could not have known that in offering kindness he was offering himself to betrayal. His memory ended there, snatched into blackness. When it returned, he was in a camp, the 3 men watching him like vultures perched on rocks, one of them gripping a fire weapon. They gave him water, and he drank, his throat parched, unaware that life itself was slipping from him again. He fell into darkness. When he woke next, he could not move. Something pressed against his face. He realized with horror he had been buried beneath a sheet of black plastic, the desert soil shallowly covering him. The air was suffocating, the world closing in. And then fate, unexpected, feral, intervened. A dingo, curious or ravenous, pawed and tore at the plastic covering his face, clawing open an air pocket. Through the animal's hunger, he breathed again. In terror and instinct, he clawed his way free from the earth, gasping, alone. The desert stretched around him in cruel silence. No car, no captors, no water, no food. They had taken his clothes, his shoes, his possessions, leaving him naked against the vast and merciless landscape. He staggered beneath the sun, his skin burning, his throat cracked, each step an act of defiance. Days passed in delirium before he stumbled upon a waterhole, a dark mirror in the desert's skin. There he built a crude shelter, waiting for rescue that never came. Hunger ate away at him until one day a lizard darted past. Without thought, he snatched it, bit into its flesh, and crossed a line into a primal state of existence. From that moment, he became the desert scavenger, devouring frogs, snakes, caterpillars, even leeches which he had to swallow quickly before they could fasten inside his mouth. He chewed grasses and plants, trusting only his tongue to judge what would unalive and what would sustain. His body dwindled, his weight falling from 230 pounds to less than 100. His ribs sharp beneath sun-cracked skin. Night brought not rest but dread, for wild dogs circled his camp, their eyes glinting, their teeth gnashing against his shelter. He believed his life measured only in days now, and so he carved a cross into the outside of his shelter, a marker for the grave it would become. 71 days passed like that, 71 days of gnawing hunger, blistering sun, and the constant presence of death. And then, a miracle of chance. 2 ranch hands, far off the road, glimpsed his skeletal figure. They rescued him, half dead, half ghost. In the hospital, his body seemed barely human, bones and skin where once there had been strength. The 3 men who had left him for dead were never found. But Ricky McGee survived, carrying the desert within him forever. His story later etched into memoir, his life rebuilt in faraway Dubai, but the memory of burial and survival carved into his soul. And in 1985, high in the Peruvian Andes, another story unfolded, one of snow, ice, and a mountain that demanded everything. Joe Simpson, 25, and Simon Yates, 21, were bold young climbers who set their sights on the unclimbed west face of Sula Grande, a wall of ice and stone so steep and perilous it had remained untouched. To conquer it was to claim immortality in the world of mountaineering. For days they ascended, battling storms that cut into their skin and numbed their limbs, until at last they stood upon the summit. But it was not the ascent the world would remember. It was the descent, for descent is when the mountain claims its price. The storm grew fiercer, visibility vanished, and disaster struck when Joe fell, shattering his leg. Pain roared through him, and both knew instantly the truth. No man with such an injury could climb down. Yet Simon would not abandon him. With rope and willpower, he lowered Joe 300 feet at a time, anchoring himself, dragging himself down after him, repeating the process hour after hour until exhaustion blurred into agony. The blizzard howled around them, snow lashing their faces, and then the rope grew taut with unexpected weight. Simon had unknowingly lowered Joe over a cliff. Joe dangled in darkness, suspended, unable to climb up, unable to touch anything, his broken leg rendering him helpless. Simon strained against the drag, his body sliding toward the edge, his anchor failing. For 2.5 hours he fought, frostbite creeping, muscles screaming, until choice narrowed into inevitability. He drew his sharp object, and with a stroke that would haunt him forever, cut the rope. Joe plummeted into the void, smashing onto ice that shattered beneath him, hurling him deeper into a hidden crevasse. Against every probability, he lived, marooned 80 feet down on a narrow ledge, the abyss yawning beneath. Above, Simon searched the next morning, shouting into the void, but Joe, unconscious, never answered. Believing his friend dead, Simon turned back toward base camp, grief and guilt his companions. But Joe awoke, broken, alone, his body racked with pain. He understood quickly he could not climb up. His choice was to wait in the darkness for death, or descend deeper into the unknown, gambling on the chance of escape. He lowered himself into the abyss, his rope unwinding into silence, the end unknotted. For if there was no escape, better to fall quickly than die slowly. And then, impossibly, he found a tunnel, a crack of light. Crawling toward it, he emerged back onto the mountain's frozen face, alive. The ordeal was not over. With his leg mangled, he crawled and dragged himself across ice and rock, mile after mile, delirious with pain and exhaustion, until at last he reached base camp. There, Simon was preparing to leave, convinced he had lost his partner. The sight of Joe, ghostly, skeletal, crawling into view, was a miracle neither man could comprehend. Doctors told Joe he might never walk again, but he defied them, enduring 6 surgeries and years of recovery until he returned to climbing. His memoir, Touching the Void, became an anthem of survival, later a film that brought the story to millions. Simon, though he walked away physically unscarred, carried forever the weight of the rope he cut, a burden Joe always defended as necessary. They drifted apart with time, but the bond of survival and shared ordeal would always remain. 3 people, 3 different worlds. An ocean, a desert, a mountain. But each faced a moment where death seemed inevitable, where surrender whispered louder than hope. And yet, in each case, something deeper stirred. A refusal to give in, a determination to claw life back from the hands of fate. Tammy Ashcraft sailing alone across an ocean after love was torn from her. Ricky McGee crawling from a shallow grave and gnawing lizards to keep breath alive. Joe Simpson lowering himself into a black abyss and crawling back from the dead. These are not just survival stories. They are confrontations with the edge of existence, proof that the human spirit, fragile though it is, can defy even the most merciless trials. Now that you've heard how Tammy Ashcraft braved the ocean alone, how Ricky McGee rose from a shallow grave, and how Joe Simpson crawled back from the void, which survival story shook you the most? Do you think survival comes from strength, faith, or pure instinct? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more.